I want to talk about some of the implications of these things that I'm talking about in here that we're addressing. And one of the stalemates that we're at in the United States is that many of us think that we're further advanced on these kinds of issues that we talk about in here than we actually are. And many of us think, especially the generation of which most of you come from, have the idea that in some ways racism, stereotyping, prejudice, all these things, there are lots of incidents, but mostly each one of us thinks that it doesn't really matter for us, that, we're beyond it, right? And it's largely the parents' generation, like my generation, the generation above or beyond, people ahead of me and so on. But, you all are grew up in a different world and it's fine and you don't struggle in the same way. And it's not what I see. And it's not what I hear. And it's not what I observe. And you don't struggle in the same way when you learn how to talk about the issues. And when you learn the right way to discuss things and the correct terminology to use and the right way to engage and approach people and so on and so forth, then really it appears as though people are way more comfortable, way more out front, and that these issues are further behind them than they actually are. But what I would say, what I observe is when we really sit down and we watch people talking and we engage, it's not really what we see. A big goal of mine in this class, the main goal, and I said it on the first day, and I want to come back to it, and I'm going to demonstrate it again today. My primary goal is to put things out into the room and make you just uncomfortable enough that you have to talk about it. And if I come into this classroom and I engage in the same kind of political correctness, like the political correct speak, that nearly all of you, and not just Americans, have learned to talk, to say, have learned to use, to engage in these issues, we don't get anywhere. And we only get somewhere when we're just uncomfortable enough that we have to leave the classroom and have the kinds of conversations that we really need to have. And so my goal is always, never to make you too uncomfortable, but just uncomfortable enough. And I've spent 40 years doing it. And so we've watched a lot of the dialogues in the past couple of weeks. And my TAs and the staff who are watching the dialogues, here's what they're saying. We've had great dialogues since, I really started with the one exercise of bringing 10 people up here. Lots of responses, lots of opinions. Lots of people throwing their ideas out. Lots of contentious groups with people on different sides of issues. And rowdy groups. Rowdy. Like energy, high energy. As opposed to people sitting around those circles in those rooms over in Pond and being asked, hey, what do you think about class the other day? And responding, I don't know. What did we talk about? It's okay. Well, what do you think about what's going on in class? No, it's all right. We don't want that. I don't want that. I want you to be engaged. I want you to sit up in the front of your seat and start having an argument, whether it's with me or you or your parents or somebody else in the room, because we only get somewhere on these issues when we're really engaging. And we're questioning and we're thinking about it. Rowdy groups, that's awesome. That means I'm doing my job that I need to do so that you can do what you need to do, which is think. So one of the things my TAs were saying is man, as they're watching groups, because every group is recorded, right? And Lori and I were looking at some groups while we were in Columbia. This TA saying like, man, what'd you say in class? Because you got a number of students who are really annoyed at you. And I'm like, I don't know. What did I say? And check this out. Across the board, the majority of students who got annoyed at me, who were using the terms like, Sam's a racist, whatever it is, were white. Like, you wouldn't know that because you're in a group, so you don't see it. The majority of students who got really unnerved by those two classes in particular are white. And I'm like, dang. Yo, what's that? It's like, it's almost like you are, it's hard to go there. You know what I mean? It's like, I find this over and over and over again. When someone calls me out for being, who knows, homophobic. This goes back years. It's like a straight person. When somebody starts questioning whether I'm racist, it's a white person. When someone starts questioning really hardcore, you're sexist, it's a man, right? It's like, damn. And so what I find is that those kinds of ideas are really silencing. So if you're sitting in a group and you're sort of pissed, it's like, Sam shouldn't have done this and he shouldn't have done that and he should approach this differently and he shouldn't talk about these issues like that and he's making people feel uncomfortable and he's all these things, and you're white, what's actually happening is you're lifting yourselves up, right? Like, you're lifting up. Because what you're doing by doing that is silencing a conversation that we need to have. Oh, don't talk about these issues. Oh, don't talk about them like that. Well, how do we talk about them? Yeah, but don't like start calling people out and pointing out their skin color. Oh, really? Well, what should we do then? Oh, we shouldn't talk about skin color. Oh, I get it. Oh, well, let's not talk about hair. Let's not talk about anything. Let's not talk about people for whom English is not their first language. Let's not talk about accents and dialects and all sorts of things. Let's not talk about anything. Let's just pretend that nothing exists. And then when we pretend that nothing exists, power doesn't ever move. Power stays the same. In the world of race, what it means is white people continue to be empowered because white people never have to look in the mirror and say, wow, what's going on? We don't have to wrestle. We don't have to engage. And according to the TA, it's not that there were no black and brown people who were also annoyed at me because whatever, but the vast majority were white people. You see how that works, right? So what I want to do today is talk about why it is that we need to talk about these issues. And I want to talk about some of the consequences of it. So let's go.
One of the questions that was brought up in the World in Conversation last week was someone made the comment that you shouldn't be allowed to talk about like black issues because you're not black. And then one of the TAs popped the question out that if you were black, but you didn't experience any racism or oppression, would you still be allowed to talk about racism and oppressions on blacks? And the same person that made the comment said you still should be allowed. And I was curious to see how you feel about that.
Wait, so hang on a sec. So the idea that somebody said was maybe I shouldn't be allowed to talk about issues related to black people because I'm not black?
Yeah, that's what they said. I didn't say I agreed with it.
No, I got that. Yeah. Honestly, I'm not even really sure how to respond to that. If we limited ourselves in that way, I would be able to talk about mostly straight white men in their 50s with graying hair who are able-bodied and professional who grew up in Ohio in the United States. That would be like it.
Yeah, and then my counter question would be like, well, if you were black, would by that same logic, would that mean that you aren't allowed to talk about white
Exactly.
issues then?
That would be the same logic. You can talk about anything. I couldn't talk about sociology. Like I couldn't talk about anything. It's like, yeah, that's one of those, dude, just because people say, and so here's what happens in the world of race, right? Because people say it in the world of race, so it like shuts everybody down, as opposed to saying, that's a really insane idea. But we often don't have those. It's like, oh my God, maybe I shouldn't talk, or maybe I shouldn't, or whatever. Yeah. And in fact, this is what we want. What we're saying is we need people to start talking about this stuff. We need to talk about it.